Hey, this is Troy from Planet 76. We've got some really good Sixers-focused content coming your way today. Make sure you subscribe to the pod so you can be in the know when we release new content. Enjoy the show. All right, what is up, Sixers fans? Welcome into another episode of Planet 76, episode 67 of the pod. Troy here, Michael here with me as always, and we are wrapping up our player profile series on the pod. We've been at it for quite some time. I mean, the last several episodes have been pretty much dedicated to these player profiles, and we're going to finish today with none other than the big fella, Mr. Joel Embiid, will be the majority of our conversation today. Going to get into some media day stuff as well. So real excited. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, if this is your 67th time, we're happy that you're here. And you can subscribe, give us a rating, drop a follow on Instagram, Planet 76 Podcasts, whatever you want to do to stay connected with us. We're a weekly podcast about the 76ers. We drop content again, just about once a week, and we, Michael and myself here, are very, very excited for the start of the NBA season coming up in under a month. So with all that being said, Michael, I'm going to toss it to you, and we'll get started on these player profiles. Joel Embiid, man, this is a fun one. Save the best for last, I guess.
Let's go. And, I personally don't have... It's crazy because I don't have nearly as much to say about Embiid as I did with a guy like PJ Tucker, which is weird because it's Joel Embiid. But for me, I know it's pretty clear at least what I'm looking for from Embiid based on what we've seen so far. And I'm gonna be pretty straightforward with my answers and things of that nature because, I mean, at least on my page, but also on this podcast for sure, I've made it pretty clear on what I'm looking for from Embiid and sort of the things that I'm still looking to see from him and his game overall.
Yeah. So, Mr. Joel Embiid, just to give some notables on him, we know the production obviously is there. But just to some accolades, if you will. So he's a 5-time All-Star. He is a 4-time All-NBA performer. He's a 3-time All-NBA defensive team member. He was last year's 2021-22 scoring champ, first center to do so since Shaq. Is that right? Yep, first center to do so since Shaq. And so the last 5 seasons, Joel Embiid has been an All-Star. He of course had the, lengthy and very interesting start to his career where he didn't play for 2 seasons with the foot injury and some other stuff going on. Yeah. But then his, first season in the NBA, 2016-17, he played 31 games. He averaged over 20 points a game. But then after that season where he only played 31 games, he has been an all-star literally every year he's been in the league. So every year he's met the minimum game requirement to be an all-star, he's been an all-star. So I think that just speaks to Joel's dominance in the league. And, of course, notably this season, averaging 30.6 points per game and nearly 12 boards. And played 68 games this past season, which is a career high for Joel Embiid, and so I'm sure we'll get into some of that too. But just to give you some notable numbers on Joel and accolades for him, and I agree with you. We got real deep, especially into some of the new Sixers acquisitions in, PJ Tucker, Daniel House, and DeAnthony Melton, and those guys. But Joel, he's the longest tenured Sixer certainly now, and then you throw in like Furkan Korkmaz, who's next, and there's a lot of new faces other than those couple guys. But
crazy.
So Joel's been nothing short of spectacular and dominant for the last 5 seasons. But yeah, what would you say? Just before we get into some things about Joel in particular this year, like what would you say just about Joel? If you could characterize him just the last 5 years and even specifically last season, what he's done.
I would categorize him as extraordinary. I would categorize him as otherworldly talented. I would characterize him as a player that you don't really ever see, and a player that we may never see again in that capacity. Obviously, you're going to see bigs and specifically centers who can do some of the things that Joel Embiid does, but you're not going to see it again, at least in my opinion, at the level that Joel Embiid does it in terms of scoring, in terms of ball handling, in terms of mobility, in terms of fluidity in his movements, in terms of just everything that he brings as a package, as a collective. You're not going to really see that again. And that's why I think it's so important that we just look at Embiid for what he is instead of, wanting him to be more or wanting him to be this or that or doing something that isn't necessarily something that he needs to be doing. I think what we've seen from Joel Embiid so far, he's already cemented himself as a Hall of Famer. He's already cemented himself as one of the great centers of all time. And I just love Joel Embiid. Like there's a lot of non-negotiables. Well, actually, there's a few non-negotiables. I think being a Sixers fan, things that are required of you. One of them is having nothing but high praise for Joel Embiid. Not only because what he's done for the team, but what he's done as a player, and who he's become and who he's established himself as in the NBA and again all time in league history.
Well said. Well said. So, and then let me ask you this, and then we'll talk in terms of this year's, 22-23 team and how Joel fits with that. But obviously, now we know that Joel's been doing it for, again, his 5 years of health, healthy play in basketball where he's been on the floor. He's averaged 23, 27, 23, 29, and nearly 31 points a game last season. Couple numbers worth noting over the last couple seasons. I mean, the last 2 seasons he's been at 37% from 3. The free throws obviously have been there, but believe it or not, Joel almost got he got over 1 free throw per game more this past season than he did the year before. He averages 11.8 free throw attempts. And the best part about that is he's going to knock them down. I mean, he's going to make 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 every time he gets to the line. So that's, statistically like 9 free throws a game that, where he's getting points from the line. So he's a special talent. He's a special player. He's among the league's best. He's second in MVP the last 2 seasons. He is just that good, and Philly fans love him. But with all that said, what do you think? Again, he led the league in scoring, and that's no small feat, pun intended, because he's 7'3". What led to that this past season? We knew he could score, but did we ever I don't know that Joel Embiid winning a scoring title was on my radar 3-4 years ago. What do you think contributed to that success this past season, scoring wise?
31 per game on career high field goal attempts, career high 3-point attempts as well. No, that's not true. 2018 was his career high, 4.1 attempts from 3 per game.
But he's getting 9.5.
A lot of
he's getting 9.5 points a game from the line.
Yeah. And also, like Troy mentioned, career high in free throw attempts this season as well. Nearly 12 per game. He made nearly 10. Again, 81%. I think a lot of his scoring came out of necessity for the team, but the rest of his scoring came from him actually being able to do it. Obviously, you have guys in the NBA who play for teams where they need scoring, but guys aren't as equipped or able scoring wise like
Right.
Joel Embiid is. So you combine ability, opportunity, and opportunity / need for a scoring presence. I think that's what we saw from Embiid this season because obviously they didn't have Ben Simmons until James Harden got here, which was October, November, December, January, February. Basically
Yeah.
5 months of the season. And obviously Embiid continued majority of his scoring tear even when Harden got here, but still, you don't have you don't have a guy like Simmons who's going to help out scoring wise. Obviously, he's not giving you 20 a game, but still it helps. You have Embiid, and then it's a huge drop off. Obviously, Maxey took that leap as a scorer, but that wasn't really until a little ways into the season where Maxey really established himself as that. The Sixers
Right.
needed that. They needed a guy to really, really give the ball to, and Embiid's been that guy, like Troy mentioned. But this season, he just really took it up a notch. Again, I think out of a bit out of
Yeah.
necessity, and then majority because simply because he's able to, and he can because he can, and
Yep.
he did.
Yep. Well said. I'll hit on the necessity point too because I think that's a big one. I think that's one that gets overlooked a little bit. You know, a lot of guys in the league. You know, you think of like Bradley Beal, who was kind of chasing for the scoring title too.
That's kind of what I was
You know,
referring
he
to.
was
Honestly,
he
I
was
kind
doing
of
it
gave that a thought for a
because
second. Yeah,
he wanted the scoring title, and
yeah.
not that like were the Wizards going to win a lot more games if he shot a little
Mm-hmm.
less? Probably not. They were probably going to win more games if he shot more, and that's why he did. But it didn't get them anywhere, obviously. But Joel, out of necessity, I think also out of fit. So again, you think of number 25 and how that fit obviously didn't work well. It worked okay, but it didn't work for 31 points a game for Joel Embiid. You think about even years previous when there was Saric and then there was Al Horford and there was just guys around him that didn't work this well. Not saying Joel Embiid didn't play well because we just are established that he did, 5-time All-Star in 5 seasons where he's been healthy. But it didn't work quite like this, and the offense was so designed around him, built around him. And then, you think about they're down an All-Star for 60 games of the season, and yet the Sixers were, in prime playoff spot, in the Eastern Conference, and that's completely thanks to Joel Embiid. And because he put the team on his back in a sense. There was a need for him to take over. There was a need for him to average a career high in free throw attempts and field goal attempts, and there was a need, and he stepped up and delivered. So that I think that's really good. But we'll get to. I know you want to talk about the fit around Joel Embiid, so we're going to get to that now. So the current roster, as it is structured. How do you feel about that specifically? Again, this is Joel Embiid's show today on episode 67, but how do you feel about how those guys that are here, those guys that have been here, those guys that are new, how does it work with Joel? Give it a grade, give it something to indicate where you think that is in terms of Joel Embiid's history here. Is it the best? Is it the worst? Is it somewhere in the middle of the road? Is there something else they need? Talk about that.
I think this is easily the best overall team that the Sixers have been able to put around Embiid. Because obviously we talk about franchise guys like Embiid. You need to put teams, not just a bunch of, bums, for lack of a better word. You need a team around a superstar who you draft number 3 overall, whatever he was. That's a franchise guy. You need to do right by that player and give him the talent that he needs to be able to maximize what he does well. For Embiid, it's scoring. And from what we saw a little bit more last season, passing, playmaking, moving the ball, decision making, things of that nature. These guys complement those. Some abilities are stronger than others, but still, these guys complement those abilities. PJ Tucker, D'Anthony Melton, Daniel House. These guys are massive upgrades from what the Sixers had last year, which still weren't bad pieces. George Niang, Jake Milton weren't bad pieces, but these players are definitive upgrades. These are the kind of players that you put around a superstar like Joel Embiid to maximize what he does well and to allow him to improve in those areas of passing, playmaking. We know Joel Embiid's gotten to become a much more willing passer, and with guys who can really stretch and bend the defense, guys like Melton, Tucker, House, again, Embiid can get those guys better looks. The quality of the shot increases when the quality of the player increases. So when you have upgrades like Tucker, who's a sniper, Daniel House, who's a great three-point shooter, D'Anthony Melton moves off the ball very well, is also a good three-point shooter. The shot that Embiid and I guess Harden as well can create for those guys increases, and you can maximize what Embiid does. You can maximize what he does well too, because him being that willing passer, it makes it easier for him to pass when he has guys who can do what Tucker and House do. So I love the fit that these guys. I love the fit of this overall team around Joel Embiid, and again, obviously James Harden. And I think it's the best overall roster that the Sixers have been able to put around Joel Embiid since he was drafted here in 6-7 years. And I give a lot of credit to Daryl Morey. In fact, honestly, I might give all the credit to Daryl Morey and obviously Joel too, because whether or not they say it, he has an influence on the roster.
Yep.
So yeah, I love it. I'm excited. This is a super talented roster with a lot of moving pieces, guys who can do lots of things at high levels, and it's going to be very fun. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Best team fit around Joel Embiid, and I would agree with that. And even as we were talking, I was just thinking, because we're thinking, again, talking about fit around Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
3-4 years ago, even maybe 2 years ago, not that we agreed with this conversation that was going on, but there was a conversation going on around, like, whose team is this? Is it Joel Embiid's team? Is it number 25 teams? It's like, and what's interesting about that is how we can go from that, where that conversation shouldn't have been happening, one, but two, to where we're at now, where you bring in a guy who's much better than number 25 in James Harden, and yet that conversation isn't a thing anymore. So, like, how do we go from where it's a conversation, whose team is it, when it should have been clear, and now it's like James Harden's here, he's a superstar, he's an MVP, and yet this is still Joel Embiid's team, which is really, really good. And I think everybody understands that. I think Joel understands that, and I think James understands that. So, and that's a good thing. Anyway, speaking of the team, so Media Day kicked off today, or, was today. Cool to see the guys back, cool to see some smiles and, all the cool photos and the big three, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, James Harden, snapping some photos too. But, we've got just a few points on our outline, but if you want to go anywhere else, we can do that as well. But why don't you hit on a couple of these and talk about it?
Yeah, some of the things we kind of alluded to and mentioned a few minutes ago, and these were kind of the main points that I wanted to hit on this episode. There was a ton of stuff from Media Day, a lot of it. Personally, I didn't really deem it as important as the things that we're mentioning here. There was a lot of just conversation pieces, things that we probably already knew, whether we wanted to admit it or not, but these things I think here are very notable and very noteworthy. One of the things we already talked about, Doc Rivers said that he thinks it's the most talented group that he's had since he's been coaching, and obviously this is going to be his third year coaching. That's pretty telling. Three years is a pretty decent sample size, and I agree. Troy said he agrees as well. It's just a very solid roster of talent, of guys that can really elevate your team and raise your ceiling. Embiid says the Sixers want to be one of the best defensive teams in the league. He wants to be the best individual defender in the league. That's something I think is notable. I think Joel Embiid has come out and said multiple times he wants to win Defensive Player of the Year, and I don't really, I'm kind of neutral on Embiid, winning awards and all that stuff. I just want him to be healthy for the playoffs
Right.
ultimately. But if he can do both, that's great because I think he's a Defensive Player of the Year caliber player. I think he is that level of a defender. He just hasn't really had the opportunity to showcase it in his past couple seasons, partially due to what Troy and I were talking about a couple minutes ago, scoring load, offensive, offensive load, things like that. Responsibilities offensively they just had to do that have taken away from his defensive abilities. But now that this team is very well equipped offensively, especially with Harden and Maxey, I think
Yeah.
and I hope Embiid is going to tap more into that. And the Sixers being the best defensive team, it's going to have to come from Embiid. He's going to have to reestablish himself as that dominant rim defender that he's been the past few seasons.
Yeah,
I mean,
he
not
takes a lot
necessarily
of
past few
pride. He
seasons,
he has
but
a lot of pride
past couple
in
seasons. Yeah.
what he does on the defensive end. For someone who's capable
Yeah.
of going and getting 30 a night, literally, in the NBA and doing that for an entire season, he takes so much pride on the defensive end. I think that's a good thing.
As he should. I mean, like I said, I think he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. He's made multiple all defensive teams. He's that caliber of a defender, and if the Sixers want to be one of the best defensive teams, it starts with Embiid.
Mm-hmm.
He's the anchor. He's the defensive engine. Not only is he the offensive engine, but he's the defensive engine. He he isn't the defense because, like I said, they have a lot of moving parts defensively, especially Thibault, House, Melton, guys like that. But it stems from Embiid, so it starts with him there as well.
Yeah. Well said. And then a few more things from Media Day. So funny. You see all these posts and you read the comments and people actually think that James was serious when he said he lost 100 pounds.
I was absolutely shocked that people thought that he was. I mean, do you not know what 100 pounds looks like?
Exactly.
He would look like a totally different person if he lost 100 pounds. He would be like skin and bone. He was only probably 220,
right.
maybe.
So funny.
That's crazy to me.
So funny that people actually kind of bought that and they're like, no way, he's lying. He didn't like. Of course he is. Of course he's lying.
Of course.
He
literally said tweet that at the end.
Yeah. Anyway, that was funny to me, but the truth is he's in great shape, and we hope he is, and we hope he's got that spring in his step, and he's going to do what he's going to do this year, and he's going to be healthy doing it. Something that you mentioned that we were sharing text earlier today about Media Day, but you said that Doc mentioned kind of in his conference that mentioned three names as to who would be the backup center, and Montrezl Harrell, P.J. Tucker, and Paul Reed. So tell us a little bit about what you make of that comment specifically here on Media Day.
I'm excited to hear that Glenn Rivers has an idea of running P.J. Tucker at the backup five occasionally because he did it in Miami. He's done it in Houston, albeit he's quite older now, but I still think he's very capable, especially due to the fact that he's still a really good three-point shooter. I like that idea a lot, especially in smaller lineups, because
what
him
could
and
that
Harden,
lineup be?
Yeah,
What do you
him and Harden
What do you think that
work
lineup
very
could
well
be?
in pick and roll. What'd you say?
What do you think that lineup could be?
Oh, well, I think it would start with Harden at the base, probably Maxey as well. Any combination of a House, Niang, Harris, Melton kind of thing for the two forward spots, and then Tucker at the five. And I like the potential that has because you have teams in the NBA who go small all the time. A lot of teams purposely go small for matchups, for advantages against the other team. The Clippers are one of those teams. They go small very often with Nick Batum at the center, or I think sometimes they would do Marcus Morris at the center as well, and he's only 6'8", so he's not much really bigger or taller than PJ Tucker. Situations like that, I think this kind of lineup would be really beneficial because the Sixers can run the floor with the Clippers while also still maintaining their defense and their how good they are defensively, especially if the lineup is any combination of Tucker, House, Melton, or even Thibault maybe, depending, again, situational. The game is situational. Um, I'm very intrigued by Doc mentioning Tucker as a backup five. Obviously, it's something you can probably assume, but it's cool to have him confirm that he's actually thinking of it. And I'm happy that he mentioned Paul Reed too, because there's been some beef with at least me and probably some other Sixers fans as well with Doc not electing to play Paul Reed at the backup center. He's shown a little bit of juice there, especially in the playoffs. He was solid. So I'm very happy and I'm glad to hear Doc Rivers mentioning Reed as well, and obviously Harold, because they signed him. They signed him to be the backup five for the most part. Yeah, and we got one more media day point. Well, actually, two more, I guess, kind of go hand in hand. PJ Tucker said that him and James Harden wanted to come to the Sixers last season, which kind of goes along with what James Harden said, which was, "Hey, the Sixers were my first choice. It just didn't happen." That's basically direct. That's basically a direct quote, by the way. You can look it up. And the team has they have bonds. Guys are friends on this team. Harden and Tucker are friends. Embiid and Harden are friends. Maxey and Embiid are friends. House, Tucker, and Harden are friends. These guys have played together 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. These guys have bonds. That's important for a squad, for a team that wants to go all in. You have to want to play with each other. It can't always be a kind of, oh well, this guy's a fine, I'll play with him. It's got to be a buy-in from everybody. Everyone's got to be like, listen, let's put our things aside at the very minimum. Let's put our differences aside. Let's play, and let's make it work. But with the Sixers, it's more than the bare minimum. We have friendships, we have relationships. These guys are happy to be playing with each other, and it's a really good environment, and it's good for the ecosystem of the roster of the franchise, because
Yeah.
obviously you want your players to be cool with each other, sure, but being legitimate friends and having friendships within the roster is really great for chemistry, for just longevity of the team working, if you will.
Right. Yeah, I think, outside of quotes and what you hear about what people say and, all that stuff, because, media day kind of reminds me of like draft day in fantasy football. Everybody loves what you hear. Everybody loves the team. Everybody loves what you got. Everybody, but something that I took away, and again, this is something that probably every team-centered podcast around the world is saying about their team right now. But I believe it's true with the Sixers, is this connection and relationship that they have, and there's just a strong bond. They like each other. They like being around one another, and that's a really, really good thing. You kind of figured that would happen with some of the guys that, they brought in that kind of have played with James Harden in the past, and Tyrese Maxey gets along with anybody and everybody. Matisse Thybulle the same way. There's just connection, and the biggest thing with that is, even the quote from that Maxey quoted Doc saying that this isn't a me season, it's a we season. Is maybe something, obviously Tyrese Maxey heard it. Maybe something that the rest of the guys are taking away too. Because I do think that there's one goal in mind, and that's to make a run and try and win a championship. And that's cool. I think everybody's on board with that. And again, that's a really, really, really good thing. So, and I thought about this earlier. Like, I don't think that's super far stretched to have a team that has championship aspirations. when you have a guy like Joel Embiid, when you have James Harden, when you have Tyrese Maxey, when you have a fourth option in Tobias Harris, when you have bench depth like this, 15 years from now, if the Sixers were to win the title in 2023, we're not going to be talking about that was such a Cinderella team. I don't know how they did it. Like, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise. People might not expect the Sixers to win the finals this year, but it's not like, we're going to be shocked if they do.
Yeah,
it's not going to be the Cinderella story of the century.
Yeah.
So, and I'm glad the team's on board with that. They believe, and you got to start with belief. So that's a cool thing. Anyway, we will wrap up this episode with a little fact or cap on Mr. Joel Embiid. We did the same with James Harden. I've got 4 for you. A couple things we've hit on, again, all surrounding Mr. Joel Embiid. So let's do this. You ready?
Cool.
All right, fact or cap. Joel Embiid makes first team All-NBA this season.
Cap.
Okay, Joel Embiid makes an all-defensive team. Side note, he has made 3 in his career. He has not made one since the 2020-2021 season. Fact or cap. All-defensive team.
I'm going to say, I want to say fact so badly, but he's going to have to be better than Rudy, Bam, Giannis this season, and maybe one more. I'm just gonna say fact.
Okay, we'll take it. Fact. We'll take. Yeah, there's a chance. You can throw a couple of those guys on one of the teams together. All right. Third, Joel Embiid finishes top 3 in the NBA in points per game this season. Of course, he was first last season. Fact or cap?
Yeah, I could see that. I'll say fact. I could see that.
Okay, and this one, I'm throwing a softball your way on this one. I want you to crush it. This is the best roster in terms of fit around Joel Embiid since he has been a Sixer. Tell me fact and tell me why.
Quite easily fact. I referenced this shirt a couple times. Every so often. I have a shirt hanging on my wall of the 2019 Sixers. Very top-heavy roster. The bench was kind of awful, not going to lie. I'm looking at that team, and I'm saying that team doesn't even compare to this team when you look at the overall talent, especially off the bench. Even in the starting lineup, I think, is better, even though they had Jimmy Butler. This is one of the best teams that the Sixers have ever had. Not even in the Joel Embiid era, but on paper, I know we like to say that. It's easy to say.
Right.
But on paper, this is one of the best teams the Sixers have ever had in terms of talent, in terms of guys who elevate your squad, guys who have traits that scale extremely well, guys who have traits that raise your ceiling and give you a higher chance to win it all, simply because they are modern examples. They're examples of modern players who can do multiple things at a high level. And those kind of players elevate your team. They elevate your chances of winning. And, again, I really can't say it enough. Daryl Morey did a great job of getting those kinds of players. He also mentioned during media day, him and Doc had conversations over the summer saying, we need guys who can play both sides of the ball. We need guys who can defend. And, yeah, that's where the league is going. That's where the league is now. These are the types of guys that help you win championships. We saw it this season with the Warriors. We see Andrew Wiggins, Otto Porter.
Right.
These guys they're the models. Even the Bucks with Drew Holiday, with not Dante DiVincenzo. I don't even know if they had him. So, guys like that, like Bobby Portis. I love Bobby Portis. These guys help you win. They're complementary pieces who do and produce at a high level.
Right. Well said. You did indeed crush that out of the park.
You.
So, I'll give you one last question.
Okay.
So, answer me this. I think we said something similar at the end of the James Harden episode, but this, again, is episode 67 of Planet 76. Thank you for joining us. All right, last question, Mike.
Let's go.
Who is in terms of the new Sixers that we brought in, so the Daniel Houses, the P.J. Tucker, the DeAnthony Melton, those guys. Who do you think is going to benefit the most from playing with Joel Embiid as their teammate?
I feel like it's gotta be PJ Tucker, but I also want to say
Okay.
DeAnthony Melton.
Okay, you say PJ because I'm going to say DeAnthony.
Perfect.
Why PJ?
I just think when you have a guy like Embiid who just commands so much attention from the defense, guys who are just straight up snipers like PJ, guys who are pretty good off the ball like PJ as well, just benefit. Like this guy's gonna get so many more shot attempts simply because Embiid's on the floor with him. The defense, I mean, even when he doesn't have the ball, the defense is
Right.
watching him. What is he doing? Is he setting a screen? Is he posting up? Is he on the wing? Where's Joel Embiid at? Meanwhile, PJ Tucker's like wide open in the corner, and whoever has the ball can just find him. Like that's what we call scoring gravity, basically. In essence, like guys draw so much attention from the defense, and the team can leverage that to create opportunities for other players.
Right. Well said, PJ Tucker. Mine's DeAnthony Melton. I think I've found a way to mention DeAnthony Melton like the last 7 episodes
okay.
somehow, but
That's okay.
I'm excited to watch him play
Yep.
in a Sixers uniform. I'm excited to see how he pairs with Joel when he gets his turn, obviously off the bench to pair up with him. And so it's going to be a fun ride. Again, this is Planet 76, and we will see you next
Yep.
time. Peace. Are you on Instagram? Why don't you go give us a follow at Planet76 Podcast so you can be in the know when we drop new episodes. Thanks for listening to this one, and we'll see you next time.